with JavaScript. So for today, we're going to start learning a little bit, just a little bit of JavaScript. So remember, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, content, styling, interaction, okay? Now that interaction is the one that allows to build web applications, right? Remember, we don't want, in this program, we don't want you to write web apps or web pages, right? Like the simple, news page or like a news bulletin or just like a newsletter or something like that. We want to write web apps, so they will have some interactions in them. For that, we need JavaScript. I mean, there is certain level of interactivity that you can manage with HTML and CSS alone, but it's very limited, right? There is no way for some apps like, for example, Twitter to work without JavaScript. And actually, it will work with certain. It will be degraded a little bit, but it'll still work. But if you have something like, give me an example. I don't know, like Facebook or any chat application, right? Where you send a message and then it sends a message and you get the message back, right? All that is essentially JavaScript. Or if you're trying to make a game in a browser, or for example, this same ScaliDraw application, this is pure JavaScript, right? There is no way to build this with HTML and CSS alone. So for that, you need JavaScript. Now, JavaScript is a programming language. The actual name is not JavaScript. The actual name is ECMAScript. So this is the standard name of JavaScript. So essentially, a long time ago, not sure when, you can find out online in Wikipedia probably, there was this browser, Netscape, right? So Netscape was the first browser that included JavaScript as a programming language that you can use. And essentially, JavaScript was created in a very short time by an engineer. Don't remember the name. You can Google them also. And that engineer created JavaScript, basically taking stuff from all the programming languages that were popular in that area, in that time, right? He took something from Java, the language. It was very popular, and that's why the name stuck up, because basically they say, okay, this is Java, but a script language in the browser, right? So he took several things, put it together. It was actually a very short time because they wanted to launch a new version of the browser, etc. And they launched it with that programming languages that with time evolved and still evolves to what we know today as JavaScript. Now, the way that language evolved is by this ECMAScript. ECMAScript is basically the name that a standards body is, and it's not a standards body from the US, it's actually a European standards body created for JavaScript. So there is I would say, organization that maintains the language, right? And every certain amount of time they get together, they discuss the new features that they want to implement in the language, and then all the browsers and all the platforms that implement the language take those changes or those modifications and then implement it as well in the language. So it's a standard. So you can run JavaScript in pretty much everywhere, right? Funny thing is that JavaScript by itself is very, I would say, poorly designed. Like the language is, a lot of people are very critical of the language because it has a lot of things that are problematic or confusing to use, right? But the thing is that it's very ubiquitous, right? You can find it in a browser, you can find it in a mobile phone, you can find it in your TV, you can find it, and actually you can find it, you see the new Apple Vision Pro headset? Yeah. You can write JavaScript there. You can write JavaScript there. So it's like very ubiquitous. You have a smart fridge, there's JavaScript in there. Everything that, and there was a phrase coined by some other engineer 10 years ago, actually over 10 years ago, and he said, everything that can be written in JavaScript will be eventually written in JavaScript. Even if people complain about the language, it's everywhere, right? So what I'm saying with that is that don't be discouraged if you see online some people saying, or people that come from the industry saying, oh, JavaScript is not a real language, JavaScript this, JavaScript that, don't pay attention to that. Because the thing is, you can find in Twitter, if you go to Twitter, Google this hashtag, thanks JavaScript. And you will see a lot of people just boasting about all their accomplishments because they learned JavaScript at a certain point and started using JavaScript, right? And you will see a lot of things there. You will see Porsches, you will see houses, you will see like everything, because people just work in JavaScript and they got better options in life and they got better jobs, and JavaScript is basically the root of all that, right? So that's what I say. Don't get discouraged by all the people in the industry saying JavaScript doesn't work, it's very bad languages. At the end of the day, you still need JavaScript to create web applications. That's a fact. There's no way around that. There's some other efforts to get some popular languages or not so popular languages and migrate it to the browser, so you can write applications, I don't know, in C# or Python or, I don't know, whatever other language. They work to a certain point, but it's impossible to deny that JavaScript is the language of the browser, right? So that's what we learn in JavaScript. And of course, this will be a brief introduction. We will have more classes about JavaScript. So this is the first one. I think all week will be JavaScript. So let's start learning a little bit about the language. Before I move on, questions? No? No questions? Cool. So we will have to start by learning what a programming language do and what's the way they work, right? So what do they do and how they work? Now, the way I would describe it is programming languages allow us to work with data, right? Essentially, all, if not all, programming languages or all programming or applications do the same thing. They capture data, they process data, and then they output data, right? So data is at the root of everything in a programming language, right? Let's say you have an app to build. You want to calculate, for example, mortgage, right? Your mortgage. You basically have some inputs, right? The rate, the amount, how many years, etc., taxes, etc. You put all that in, and then that program will calculate all the information, and it will give you, I don't know, an amortization table for that loan, right? So that's essentially what a programming language, what a program does. It's like takes data, transforms that data, and then outputs that data, right? So what I'm trying to say is that at the root of every program is data. So what we're going to handle in programming is data, right? Everything is data. So it's logic that we start with what are the data types that we can use in a programming language, right? Especially in JavaScript. So in JavaScript, we have very few data types. So when I say data types, what I'm just trying to say is that data can take many forms, right? It could be numbers, it could be text, it could be a list of elements, it could be structures data, right? So a date, that could be some data. Basically saying yes or no, that's another type of data. So we will find what are the data types that we have. So the data types that we have in JavaScript are very few. Those are string, number, Boolean, date, array, and object. Am I missing something? Well, these are the basic ones. And we will find out what are they. Now, all the data in a programming, in a JavaScript program, are stored in variables, right? So the data doesn't live, in the air. The data is stored in a variable. So all data is stored in variables. So think about variables as places in the memory where you can store information, right? That information is essentially any of these types. So you can store, for example, a name, right? Your name. You can store it in a variable. And we will see what a variable is in a minute in how to declare a variable. Or you can store what is the amount or the rate that you want to have this loan calculated with, right? That also is some data that you will store in a variable. Or if you want to calculate with taxes or no, right? That's another variable type. So all that data has to be stored in a variable. So what is a variable in JavaScript? A variable is a place in memory that has a name, so you can refer to that name, right? A variable is essentially a word describing what are you storing in it. So for example, if I want to store my name, I would say my name. That's the name of the variable. Or if I want to store the rate, loan rate. Or if I want to store that I want to calculate that loan with taxes or not. With taxes. Right? Notice something, that I'm writing variables all together, no spaces. So, no dots, exactly. So the rules and the syntax, remember in programming, the same way in JavaScript, in HTML and CSS, we have a syntax. In JavaScript, we have a syntax. Now, JavaScript syntax is way more strict than in HTML. HTML browsers are very forgiving with HTML. So if you miss a closing tag or something, the browser will still show it, right? In a programming language, if you put something wrong in the code, that will not work, and it will tell you this is a problem here. Okay. So how do we create a variable name? So variable names can only use these characters from A to zeta, lowercase or uppercase, from 0 to 9, the underscore character or the $sign character. That's it. Sorry? No, wait. What do you say? Sorry?
A to C.
Oh, yeah. You're going with the math definition of thing. Okay, let's do that. Got it. Okay, so what I'm saying is that you can only use these characters. Any character from the A to C, lowercase, any character from A to C, capital case, so lowercase, capital case, all the digits from 0 to 9, the underscore character or the $sign, right? No spaces, no, only these characters. And the other rule is that cannot begin with numbers. So all of those are, valid variable names. So my name, loan rates with taxes. But if I do is a valid variable name?
Is that yes?
Yeah. No? Yeah, because it cannot begin with a number.
Exactly.
It
It doesn't. So it is a valid variable name. So let's put another one. What about this? Valid or invalid?
Valid.
Valid. Why?
It begins with the underscore.
It starts with the underscore, exactly. So it's still valid. Okay? So the one that are invalid is this. If I do 8 ball,
No.
that will be invalid. This is not a valid variable name.
And it can be as long as you want.
It could be as long as you want. And then, right? So now you know how to name it. Well, you know what is the syntax of the name, right? A to C, capital lowercase, 0 to 9, underscore or $sign. Cannot start with a number. Now, imagine like if you can do any of these three, or maybe you say, okay, my variable name is and then in some other part of the code, I write and then in some other part of the code, I write something like this, right? They are technically correct, right? Because valid characters. No, don't start with 0. So they technically are correct, like syntactically correct variable names. Now the issue with this is that it will be a mess, right? Because now you're putting just any case and any underscore here and there. So for that, we have conventions, right? So there is a very standard convention about how you name your variables. And the one that we use in JavaScript is this, camel case. And notice that in camel case, the words are on lowercase, and they start with lowercase, but every new word starts with a capital letter, right? Notice there, camel case, compared to Pascal case. Pascal case, all words are lowercase, and every word has a capital letter, capital initial. Okay, that's what camel case. And we'll have also
Kebab case.
snake case. Sorry?
The kebab case.
Yeah, we don't use kebab because kebab will be not valid. Kebab case is this.
The one on CSS.
That's the one on CSS, yes. Yeah, these are the conventions for naming stuff. Of course, we don't use this in JavaScript because it's invalid, right? So let's remove it. Sorry, can you repeat?
You said what, you don't use those?
Yeah, this one,
Yeah, it's invalid.
because it has an invalid character. The dash is not valid. So let's not talk about it for now. Now, camel case is the default convention that we use for variable names, right? All variable names should be written in camel case. I'm not saying that if you write it in a different way, it will still work, but it's not the convention, right? So it's best if you use the convention. Now, Pascal case, we use it in JavaScript, but for now we are not going to discuss when do we use it. So let's avoid this for a second. And snake case, you can also use it. It's pretty common with APIs, and it's also the default. I think snake case is the default convention in Python or some other like Python, Rails, backend related programming languages. But because you will see it in backend related programming languages, it's pretty common to see an API where all the data that we get from the API is in snake case, right? So it's good to understand why we have that, right? So snake case, Pascal case, and camel case. Those are the 3 cases that we use. For now, we're going to focus on create variables in camel case. Questions? No? Okay, so let's create some variables and store some data on them. Now, the JavaScript programs are composed of instructions. All JavaScript programs are composed of instructions. And instructions are reading from top to bottom, reading and executed from top to bottom. That means that when you have a JavaScript program and you want to run that program will be executed from top to bottom. So first instruction, second instruction, and so on and so forth, right? So all instructions will be executed from the top, right? One after the other. And every instruction should end with a semicolon. So at the end of every instruction, you put a semicolon. Now, it's debatable. You will find it online that it's debatable if you need to put the semicolon or not, right? JavaScript, the language, the interpreter, doesn't actually need it, but if you put it, they will still work. So in some cases, it's actually needed, but we're going to put semicolons at the end of every instruction. So that will help us understand that there is an instruction that ends there, so we need to start writing the next instruction in the next line, okay? So a semicolon ends the instruction. By the way, if you want to put 2 instructions on the same line, you have to separate them by a semicolon, okay? Otherwise, it will be an error. Okay, so variable, the first instruction that we're going to work today is variable declarations. So how do we declare a variable? We declare a variable this way. Const var name and the value, sorry. So let's say I want to use my name, first name. Okay? That's an instruction that is declaring a variable name, first name, and assigning, remember, variables store data. And it's assigning or storing this data. And this data is basically a text with my name, right? Now, when I say assigning, it's because I'm using this symbol, it's the equality sign. And this is actually it's not equality, it's the assignment symbol, right? Because one equal sign means assigning. So what I'm trying to do with this instruction is declaring a variable name, first name, and then assigning the value Ernesto to that variable. Okay? So right now, in memory, after this instruction is executed, there is a place in memory, name, first name, that has this value stored. Okay? So if I want to create another variable, let's do age. Well, not age. Let's do interest rate. Got it? So this is a value that is numeric. It's a number. Now you see the difference between these two values. One is a string and the other is a number. The strings are text, exactly, and they are wrapped with double quotes or single quotes. We will find out the strings later. Okay? Now there is another way, and we will see the difference between them to create variables, and it's with the word let. So let monthly payment equals okay. Now this is exactly the same, well, not exactly the same, but we will see the difference now. But we are also creating another variable named monthly payment, and we are assigning that value 654.45. Okay? Now notice that I use two instructions. Similar, but they have a small difference. What's the difference? You probably see it already. What's the difference between those two?
The first.
Const and let, right? So const versus let.
This constant.
Is a constant, exactly. Constant, that's what constant. So constant is a variable that cannot be reassigned, right? So if I try to do first name equals John, that would be an error, right? Because John is a constant, cannot be reassigned. But if I do monthly payment equals that will work because let variables can be reassigned. Okay? So those are the two ways that we can create variables in JavaScript: const or let. Now these are the new way. You will find online that you can use something called var. So you can do var name equals Marie, right? And it's there in the language. That means that you can use it, but never use it, right? Again, there is a bunch of stuff in JavaScript we don't use anymore. So var is one of those, right? So never in any code that you write, put the word var, right? Like never. Don't ever put var. Just use const or let. And the reason is because var, because it was created like in the beginning, all the variables var. But the problem with var is it has implications that are outside of our control. So we don't use var anymore. So after some years, the body that created JavaScript say, okay, var is very problematic. Let's find a way to simplify this for developers. So they came up with const and let. So const are for constant, never change, and let are for variables that change during the execution of the program, right? And then var nobody uses anymore. But the thing is that you can still create a variable named var this, and assign it with all the implications that they have. But in your code, you should never use var again. Make sense? Okay, so never never use var. Like this is, I would say, forbidden. Yeah. No. Even if you saw documentation online, like if you saw an example online and you want to copy paste it, and it has var, copy, paste it, and change the var for cons or let, depending on. I mean, var is closer to let than to cons, right? So use let in that case. When you copy and paste that has a var declaring it, just change it to let, okay? But never use var. Great. Questions? Cool. So now you know how to create variables, right? You can create a cons. Let's say, oops, now it's red. So you do cons var name equals the value. So you can store anything on a variable, anything that's data, right? And let's see what are the data types that we have. Remember that we have string, number, boolean, date, array, and object. Those are the data types that we have in JavaScript.
You use those same ones, those same data types there's no difference in structure there, right?
No, it's the same syntax for creating a variable. It shows that the data types have different values that you can use, right? So a string, you have to wrap it in quotes, right? This is text in quotes. So that's a string. Whenever you see a text wrapping quotes in a JavaScript program, that's a string. Okay? That's a value, that's a data type, that's a data of type string. Now, it could be double quotes or single quotes. Actually, this one.
Is the same?
Sorry?
Is the same?
It's the same, exactly. Depending on what you preference, actually companies have like these guidelines. So when you go to a company, they will give you like a guideline on how to write code, and they will say, oh, we only use single quotes, right? Or we only use double quotes. Depends on the company. Like for example, my company is single quotes. Everything is written in single quotes. And you only put double quotes if you have a single quote inside. Like if you had to write Kent, that would be an issue, right? Because you have a single quote inside a string with single quotes. So you would do double quotes and then put the single quote inside. Make sense?
Yeah.
Same, the other way around is the same. If you need to put double quotes here, then you wrap the text in single quotes. Make sense? Now, there is another way that you can write strings in JavaScript, of course. There's always another way. And it's with this thing called backticks. The name is really backticks because they are single quotes, but they are like, I don't know, skewed to the left, I guess. Yeah, to the left. So backticks the character backticks is used for something called string templates. We can find those later, so don't worry about them now. But they work exactly like if you don't have anything inside, like hello John, that's still a string, right? Because it's inside backticks. Okay, still a string.
So it works just like quotes?
Sorry?
It works like quotes, is that what you're saying?
Exactly like quotes, but they have an extra functionality that we will not see now. They're very good for templates, and we will find out how to work with templates later. But for now, you know that there is another way to create string. So when you see in a code double quotes, single quotes, or backticks, you know that whatever is inside is a string, is text, right? Now numbers are pretty straightforward. There is no difference between an integer like 1, 0, minus 78, or decimal values, right? Like you can have, I'm not sure the precision that we have in JavaScript, but yeah, basically numbers. By the way, precision in not just JavaScript, but pretty much any programming language is pretty bad. Like when you try to do, and you can try this in a browser, try to sum these two numbers. So what do you think this will be? It's actually simple. So what do you think this will be? This sum? 0003, right? So not in any programming language in the world. Like no, it's just the way computers try to represent decimals. It's an approximation. It's not exact. And because it's an approximation, when that particular case, you can try it in any programming language, you will get the same result. And the same result is that, actually, let me show you. So this will be JavaScript. It's an approximation, right? So 0.001 plus 0.002, it should be 0.003, but it's actually 0.0000003. That 0.003 is actually a remainder of the way they represent that 0.001. So when you add those two remainders, that's what you get, right? So, and that's true for any programming language. Like it's not just JavaScript. This is JavaScript, but if I do Python, and I do the same, I got the same, right? It's the way computers represent those decimal values. I can do Ruby you want, and they will be exactly the same. Oh, sorry. I'm not sure that we can run Ruby like this. Actually, no. Or maybe yes. No. No. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that programming languages are really bad with decimal numbers, right? And they are so bad with decimal numbers that most programs, when they work with money, right? We don't store, like if you have like a price in cents with 99 cents or 1.99, we don't store 1.99. What we store are the cents because those are integers, right? So we store 199 instead of $1.99 because those 99 cents, if you start adding cents, it gets messy, right? But you can add the integer addition is precise, right? That's really exact. But when you add decimals, that's it. That's all messed up. So in most programs, you don't store decimals. You store the cents, and the cents are integers, right? So when you do something like, oh, this is a price that is 1.99 plus 2.44, right? You're making like a check, and I don't know how much that is, but you don't store it like that. You don't store 1.99 and then 2.45. You store 199, 2.45, because those are the cents. And when you add those two, it will always be exact, right? So then you can turn it back to dollar, exactly, without the decimal. So we don't use the decimal, especially when we're handling currency. That's what I'm trying to say here. So be careful with floats. Like this is not good. This is decimal values in JavaScript and every other programming language. It's really bad. Okay, so now we know how to store data, text, and numbers. Correct? Now, there is another data type that we use for logic operations called Boolean. And Boolean is because the person that invented was George Boole, like the name was Boole, the last name actually. So he invented the logic, right? The Boolean logic. Boolean is basically when you have a logic that says true, that handles true or false, only those two values. He created a whole set of logic, and that's what we use in programming today. And in his honor, we created this data type. This data type, all programming languages also have Booleans. Now, the two values in JavaScript for Boolean are true and false. And notice that I wrote true, the word true, and false, the word false. So those are words that you cannot use as variable names because those are values directly. So true, false. So if in JavaScript, true means true, and false means false. Right? Now, in JavaScript also, everything that is not 0 is true.
What?
Everything that is not 0 is true. Right? So, and everything that is 0 is false, or empty is false. Got it. Okay. So we have these two values. We also have a date. Now, the date is actually like an object. So I would not pay too much attention now to it. But you can represent dates in JavaScript as well. Arrays, I will just skip this a little bit, so I will not get into details for now. Arrays are basically lists. Okay, lists of values. And they are expressed like this, with a square bracket. So when you have a square bracket and values inside, like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the closing square bracket, that's an array. That's a list of elements, an array. And of course, we use a lot of them because most of the data that we use in real life are arrays, are lists, right? Let me put an example. You go to your bank application and you open your bank account. All the list of transactions that you have is an array, right? Every transaction is described in that array. If you have if you work in like for example, the attendance that we probably TAs are getting now, right? That's an array of students. So arrays is a pretty common data structure that we use. And JavaScript has this array data type. And the way you set an array is you put a square bracket, you can put all the values inside, separated by a comma, and then you close the square bracket, right? Now, when I say the list of values, values can be anything. It could be a string, it could be a number, it could be a Boolean, it could be an object, it could be another array, right? Because an array is also a value, correct? So it could be anything. It could be a variable, correct? Anything that you have data, where you have data, explicit or in a variable, you can put it inside an array. Make sense? So let's say let's say I want an array of the weekdays, right? I can create cons weekdays, square bracket, and I do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, okay, should know, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, can someone see the error? Ah, you got it, right? So there is an error in this instruction, and it's because I used intentionally, this is not a valid string, right? Because it starts here, but it should close with a double quote as well. Remember, JavaScript is if you put something wrong, it will tell you this is wrong. And then you will know, not when you are writing it, you will know when you are executing it, right? So, and it will tell you fast, like programs are designed to fail fast. When I say fail fast, is as soon as you send an error, it will stop the program and it will show it in the screen, right? When you see your phone and you have an app, you're running an app, and the app closes like quickly, that's not this, because it was an error in the app, and the app and the phone just close the app because it cannot do anything with that app, right? Once it fails, it just shuts down the application, okay? Okay, so this is an example of an array. Oh, I'm missing the semicolon. This is an example of an array. It's an array of strings. Make sense? Pretty simple. Cool. Can someone give me an example of an array of, let's say, Well, let's not go there. Okay, let's do another example of an array of. Sorry?
Deposits.
Deposits. That's a good one. Deposits. Okay. Now, that will be my array, this one, by the way. Of deposits. I was just kidding you. So this is another array, but how many elements in this array? Yeah, but how many in this one? The one that says deposits.
It's small.
Wait, what do you say?
Zero.
Sorry?
0.
0, exactly.
Yeah,
It's,
exactly.
it's empty. It's an empty array.
Yeah.
It doesn't have anything in it. So you put a square bracket and then you close it right away. That's an empty array. That is,
Log into my bank account.
yeah, that was mine too. So no deposit this month, or whatever this deposit variable means. It's an empty array.
So that's the actual value.
That's an actual value, yeah. The empty array. The other object, we will have like a full class on arrays, because arrays are super important in JavaScript and we use it a lot, so we are not going to discuss them further now, but let's take the last one. And the last one is the object. And we will also have a class only for objects, but let me say the object, you use curly brackets, right? So objects are used for structured data. When I say structured data, let's try to describe, and with an example, let's try to describe this classroom, right? Let's try to, but with things that we can measure, right? So I will create classroom, a variable named classroom, and I will use curly brackets. Remember, curly brackets are used for objects, JavaScript objects. And objects are used to store data that it has some structure in it. And the structure is, you can say, this property has this value, and this property has another value, and this property has this value, and this property has this value, right? So you have value or property name, value. So how we'll describe this classroom? I will put an example. This classroom number is, can someone read me the number? 614200. Right? That the number? I got it right? What is another property of this classroom?
Students.
I would say, students are not part of the classroom. Workstation. How many we have? 24, I guess. Okay, workstations. 24. What else?
Chairs.
Chairs, yeah, it's a good number because it's not the same number. So we have 24, 26, 27, 24, 25, 26, 27, right? Yeah, 27 chairs.
Servers. What is servers?
Servers. Let me do has servers.
True.
Good. Notice that this is has server. Yes or no? If it's a yes or no, it's true or false, right? So in this case, true. Anything else? What? TVs. TVs, yes. How many? 2 or 3? Well, 2. So you see that I am starting to describe with properties this classroom. So this is an object that has a structure, right? Because it has a number, workstation, chairs, has server, TVs. Now this is our classroom, but we can create another next classroom. The ones that's next to us. And it probably has a different number. I'm not sure what number it is, but we can find out. Workstations, I think it's 0 because there's no workstation in the next classroom. Chairs, probably a little bit more because it's just chairs. Has servers, Next classroom, do you see it? Are you checking the one? Doesn't have anything, it's just a classroom, like a regular classroom.
False.
False, exactly. Because it doesn't have servers, right? So the property has servers, should be false. TVs, I'm not sure, but I will put 0 now. So this is what an object is. It's just a way to describe something with structured data, right? And it can be used for anything, right? So for example, if I'm describing, now let's do something more interesting here. Let's try to describe the students inside that classroom, right? How do we start describing the students? I know we have at least 20 students. So what type of data is that?
Gender?
No. I have to put all the students in a data structure. What type of data structure is that?
You're trying to list all the students?
Just say it.
An array.
It's an array, exactly. So how do I create an array?
A
What's-
variable
The
and
bracket
assignment.
thing, the square bracket.
It's the square bracket, yeah. So I put a square bracket and I close it because I want to keep it. Now I know that this is not empty. I mean, we have students. So I will open here. And how do I describe the students?
Like name, last name, or
Last name, first name, email. I can put any type of data. So for every element in that, remember, an array can have any value. So it could be a name, it could be a string, it could be a number, it could be a boolean, it could be another array, or it could be an object. So now I will do curly brackets for the first student. Name. Give me your name. Now you Fernando? So Fernando. And your email. Don't worry, I will just make one. Fernando@gmail.com. Right? So that's the first student. Now, second student. I don't know, whatever. Email. So you see where I'm going with this is that objects are very good at structuring data, storing data that has some structure. In this case, the structure is, oh, I have a number, I have a station, chairs, see if it has servers, TVs, and then I have an array of students, and for every student, I will have a name, an email, and I can add more properties if I need them, right? So that's exactly how all applications, especially web applications, work. When you, in your browser, you have, for example, your bank. I'm still going for the bank because I want you to think about the most secure or complex application that we can build, right? So let's say you have a bank application. When you connect to your bank application and the bank application goes to the server, the information that is pulling out is essentially your account, right? But it's your account with all the transactions. But also for your account is the account number, the routing number, the what do you say, the balance. And then for every transaction you will have when the transaction was made, what was the amount, what's the you know, when you have a transaction, it also has like the resulting balance. And what is probably the description of the charge or whatever, right? So all that information is stored in what? In an object, right? So essentially, JavaScript, we are sending objects and receiving objects. Remember when we were sending a form,
Yeah.
right? In a form, every input in the form has a name, correct? So name, age, I don't know, depending if it's a payment form, it's like card name, your zip code, your, you know, the amount that you want to charge, etc. All that information is collected and sent to the backend, right? We can collect all that information, put it in an object, in a JavaScript object, and send it to the server. That's usually the way the web works today, with JavaScript objects. So the whole thing, all the information that's moving through the web is basically in this format over here. Objects. We send in objects and we're getting objects back. That's why objects is really important data type, right? Because it's kind of like the the thing that makes it all work together, right? We have strings, numbers, booleans, dates, arrays, but object is the most powerful of them all, correct? Questions?
So
Yes.
You mostly
Exactly, yeah. Everything is an object. When you send data to the backend, it's an object. When you get data from the backend, it's an object. And you can even check it, like, let's do some weird, like this, for example. This is the 4Geeks website, right? If I open the network here, and I try to go to my dashboard, see what happens. Oops, a lot of things. So let's see if we can find out what is the data that we got from the server. So me, actually, there it is. So me is a request that this browser sent to the server to show my information. And notice that the data, you see, that's the object. You see the object? Oops, let me see if I can make it bigger, look bigger. You see the object has all this property, an email, the first name, the last name, my GitHub. So for my GitHub, I have my avatar URL, the name, the username, and then I have a profile, and I have roles, and I have permissions, and I have settings, right? In this case, the setting says that the language is English. So if I go here and I set it to Spanish, the next time that request is made, let me see if I can find it again. It's basically called me here.
It's the other one, I guess.
Yeah, probably. Nope. Well, I have more information now. Interest. Well, you get the point, right? I'm just showing you like everything is a JSON object that's moving. It's a JavaScript object moving through the web.
Is that what JSON is?
That's what JSON is, yes. So yeah, JavaScript. Oops. Essentially, JavaScript object notation is what JSON is. So JSON is a standard format where all browsers interact and backends interact. And yeah, it basically stands for JavaScript object notation. So object notation is this notation that we have here, the object notation. So that's what I'm saying, that all web works with JSON, with objects. It's because we are sending objects and we're receiving objects, right? This is just a sidetrack of what JavaScript, of what JavaScript is. So questions about JavaScript? So there is a bunch of instructions. I cannot give you all the instructions. I just want you to give you the main ones, right? Create variables, because from there, all the other instructions are related. Now, the only instruction that I will give you next is the console log instruction. So this is a pretty simple instruction called console log. So console log is an instruction that allows you to print anything on the console, right? When I say console, that means the terminal. So with console log, you can print anything on the terminal. And anything is whatever you put inside these parentheses. So whatever you put inside these parentheses, it could be one of these things. It could be a variable. It could be some data. Like, for example, if I want to say hello, right? Now, if I do this, what do you think it will happen?
It will fail.
Why?
Because I think it's expecting a string to log.
It's not expecting a string. You can write numbers as well.
You have to name the variable.
Exactly. You will say, okay, hello is not a string, so it should be a variable because it looks like a variable. Do we have a variable named hello? And of course, you don't have a variable named hello, so this program will fail at that point because there is no hello in your program, right? So wrap it with string, with quotes, so it's a string. So you can console log hello. So what I'm saying is that this instruction allows you to print anything to the terminal, right? And it's one of the most, if not the most, used instruction in JavaScript. And it's because usually you don't see it. Like if you see a website, like if you open your terminal and you see in the console, that console that you see there, that's what the terminal is, right? So all of these are basically errors or console logs from your application. So every time you do a console log in JavaScript, it will show up here, right? In that thing here. Some applications have more, like for example, this one, intercom launcher is disabled, blah, 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 blah. But the code that printed this is using console log. Because the only way to print here is by using console log, right? By the way, the point of console log is not to build applications with it, because of course, when the console is not open, nobody will see it, right? Nobody will open the console intentionally to see what you're putting there. But we as developers use it because when you are building some code and you don't know what your code is doing, you can say console log this variable or whatever you want to check, and you can open the terminal and see, oh, it's printing this and this is the value. Because of course the code is executing, but you don't have a way to see the memory or see the status of the variable or what's the variable looking at, right? So you can print the variable in a console log, and you can see in the console how the variable, what's the value of that variable. So you can figure out if something is wrong. So that's what I'm saying is that probably the most used instruction because it's very heavily used in debugging programs, right? But you should not use it for creating programs unless it's intentional. Okay, cool. So let's work on the practice. By the way, we have to take some break. And let's work on the practice. And in the practice, we can see the rest of the instructions. Okay, questions before I move on to practice? No? Cool. Let's stop here.